I was just going to say, this podcast is being brought to you by the Canada Tourism Board, trying to attract you to come up and visit and then figure out how to move. Right? No, but it does sound like that you've made life choices that a lot of folks. I'm going to start this over a little bit here. There's a saying out there that says, "Live like no one else will, so you can live like no one else can." Right. And so you've made those choices, whether it's 2 years, 5 years, 9 years, whatever the number of years, you've made certain choices in your life. About the way you're going to live during your accumulation phase, the way that you're going to live during your child rearing phase, the location of where you're going to live. All of this has played into what many people would say is a life that they would be very jealous of. You have a life that they would be very, very jealous of, except for they want that lifestyle and they also want to be living on the beach in California or Florida, or they want to have that Manhattan high rise, or they want to be living in the mountains so they can go skiing all the time in Denver. So the reality is that your choices have led you to the lifestyle that you have today. And I think that that's the important thing that we kind of reiterate with fire all the time, is that your choices in life help you get to your fire. You get to that why. And that's I think that's really the important thing here is, if you want to fire and have children, are you willing to make the choices that would allow you to get to there so that you can have the lifestyle like that, whether it is a fat fire where you are spending $100,000 a year and you have a kid or two kids, or you have a less fat fire,
a chubby fire.
Yeah,
it should be a chubby fire.
A little on the thick side fire, right? And I think that's what really kind of what we're drawing on here is, what choices are we willing to make so that we can get to what we want.
I do have to ask though, do you, based on, you obviously are very familiar with life in the United States, and obviously now in Canada, would you be able to both fire, not be working, being able to stay at home full time if you did live somewhere in the United States, do you think? Or do you think that's only a luxury that you were able to achieve living in Canada?
I think we could. I mean, we would have to be more strategic about it with the whole ACA, the Affordable Care Act and health insurance. And we'd have to obviously do our research on that, which I have not spent any time on because it doesn't apply to me at all.
Right.
But yes, I think we could, since we are relatively low spenders, we would be able to get many of the tax breaks, quote unquote, that are given to what low income people, even though we are not we are low income, but high net worth. To me, it's all backwards, the whole system's backwards, that we are able to qualify for some of these things. And we would also be able to qualify for those things in the States. So yes, I do think we still would be able to. And like I said, most of our accounts are in US dollars. So we would be we've house hacked. So we wouldn't have the housing equation in the States, and it's crazy everywhere. It's crazy up here too. But that part would be relatively equivalent. We'd have the housing down pat there, like we have here. And, we'd still find the free things there. There's free things everywhere. We'd still be able to optimize and find, those low cost alternatives. In Florida, it was more well, we can travel hack really easily because we were by so many hubs between Fort Lauderdale and Miami that we can easily go to wherever, anywhere in the world that we wanted to through travel hacking. That was part of it as well. As there's so many ways that you can hack through life. And I say hack as a pro, not as a thing that you're doing illegally by any means, I say it as a very proud thing to be able to hack something.
You're not Donald Trump, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's these are things available, where these are all things out there, right, that anyone can do. So yeah, I do think we could. It would be a different lifestyle for sure. We are very outdoor oriented here. And if we were in Florida, we would be in our car more. It's just not as easy to be walking around in our neighborhood that we were in Florida. Everything's more spread out in a sense, versus the community that we're in now. So, life would be a little bit different, but yeah, I think we still could do it. There would just be different, loops to have to go through to get to the lifestyle that we're doing now, which is a lot easier for us to do. There's less loops and hoops that we have to jump through to get to this point. But yeah, I think a lot of Canadians see it the other way. They think, oh, if I was just in the US, things are so much cheaper there. I could be fired so much sooner because, housing is cheaper and food is cheaper and car insurance is cheaper. And it's true, like our expenditures are higher here when you look like so many things. I'm like, it's cost what for electric bill here? Everything is more expensive here. So I do think it would probably be easier in the state. Yeah, so there's definitely trade-offs. We have the social benefits for sure, but our food is more expensive. Our utilities are more expensive. Our housing tends to be more expensive. So there are definitely trade-offs. It's not like we are living in a lower cost area in Canada, and that is purposeful. So that way we do have a travel budget. Otherwise, if we were in a Vancouver or Toronto of the world, we would not be able to spend any money on travel and escape winters. Whereas here, where we are near Calgary, we love this area, but in the winters, we can go and travel to wherever, Portugal, you name it, you name it, Thailand, wherever, for 2-3 months out of the year and have the same overall spend than if we were living in a more expensive, higher cost of living place. And I think that applies to the States too. You can be in the New York cities or the San Frans of the world of the States, or you can be in, other cities that are very enjoyable and LGBTQ friendly.
Toledo,
and
Ohio.
Right. Yeah, like there are places out there and it's about building your community too in that sense, right? Like, finding your tribe, whatever that tribe may be. So yeah, I do think it would be doable. And to go back to what you were saying before too, is with fire and everything, we call ourselves valuists, and like we spend money on things that we value, and we figured out what those things are. So that's, step one is like, what do you actually value? When we were talking about the Joneses, and stop following the Joneses, like figure out you, and then cut out the fluff. There is so much fluff out there. So the people spending, making $100,000 and spending all of it because you have it, it's like, do you really need to be spending that money? And I think having our student loans from the get-go was actually our saving grace to all of this. Well, I don't wish over $100,000 of student loans on anyone, but I'm glad we had that in a sense that it forced us. We wanted to pay it off ASAP. Some people would pay the minimum for the 20-30 years that you could, and then it's a burden, right? But like for us, it was, we want to get rid of this as soon as we can. So how do we do this? Okay, well, let's still live like our poor college lifestyle and live with the roommates, live across the street from work, so we're hardly spending on transportation and rent, and put that money towards those loans. And then once those loans were paid off, it was like, okay, well, now let's put that money towards a down payment, because we weren't spending it anyways on ourselves. And then once the down payment was done, it's like, then I discovered Mr. Money Mustache. I'm like, oh, okay, let's invest this money instead. So it's always been about like having that gap between your income and your expenses, and making that money work for future you, not for current you that's going to spend on whatever it is, and then in a year or so you've lost interest in that item, whatever it is. So it's more figuring out that mindset. The earlier the better, but regardless of the age, you can get there in 10, 15, 20 years if you commit to it. This is not a get rich quick scheme, right? Like this is no MLM thing going on. It's like it takes time, but it's not depriving yourself. Like never once along our journey did we feel like, oh my gosh, when is that, when is 2023 going to get here? Like never once did we think that, like it was more optimizing. Not even
during 2020, you weren't saying 2023 going to get here.
Different year, different circumstances.
But it's always been about like gamifying life and optimizing life and figuring out like we get joys and being like, oh, we just saved $100 by just switching to this company that we never heard of, but thank you so and so for introducing us to them. Like now our car insurance is now $200 less. So, little things like that. Like, oh, if we just volunteer for the Spartan race, we can get in for free. Like, let's just volunteer and help set it up for 2 hours the day before. And now we don't have to pay the $60 entrance. Like little things like that, that you can just do that are, ways to hack through life. And like, that's how you can bring your expenses down. So there's multiple ways of reaching fire, increasing your income, lowering your spending, do both. It's all about that savings rate, right? And like increasing that. But for us, like we find like we were never crazy high income earners. We earned combined about $110,000 between the two of us. So we weren't these crazy, like techie, in the tech world making 200,000 plus each. Like that wasn't us. So it's how do we create this gap by being creative about it, right? Like,
Right.
so for us, it was on the expenses side. So it's always been fun. Like when we were travel hacking and traveling over the years, we've been to over 25 countries. Like now the thought of traveling with kids, we're like, where should we go? I'm like, nowhere. Like what? I don't even know what
Down the
we would
block
do
and
with
back.
yeah, like it just does not sound enjoyable right now. But in
So
It's an
time, in due
option.
time,
It's an
we will.
option if you have,
Yeah.
if you want it.
I think
Yes.
what I really like about the kind of the way that this question just went, and the discussion just went, is you really kind of highlighted what I think is kind of the crux of the questions that, or the comments that John and I get, right? The comments are, I can't, more often than not, are, I can't do fire because I am, or because I'm doing. And they all seem to be based in an excuse as to why you're not willing to make some sort of changes. Now, granted, there are some people who immediately at their income level may not be able to create much of a spread, right? If you're earning
Mhm.
$22,000 a year, then you have an income problem and you need to focus on the income side. And then, but keeping in the back of your mind that the whole reason for growing your income is so that you can create the gap, so that gap can add to your portfolio that you will use to someday fire. And we know people who have done this. We know people in the fire community who started out as some individuals in the community started out as basically either unemployed or homeless, living on the streets, and now have a number of years later fired. So that the situations are not what are going to control you. It's the mindset that is going to control you as
100%.
to whether or not
Yeah.
you get there or not. And I think that's kind of we wanted to talk through this idea that having children can be your excuse for not firing, or it can be your reason for firing and actually help
Right.
you get there.
Right,
Right.
exactly. It could be your
Yeah.
motivation, right? And
Right.
yeah, like you said, there's always going to be excuses. And for the people who are working minimum wage jobs, like you said, that is the income side that you need to be focusing on.
Right.
But for anyone earning more than $50,000, there's a way to optimize, whether that's, increasing that maybe to $60,000, asking for a raise, switching jobs, jumping to a different company, showing your worth to your boss, things like that, or, working on the expenses side, getting a roommate, commuting, going to a public transportation or a scooter if you're in a place where you can drive like a Vespa. Like I had a Vespa in the States and I miss it
I
so
want
much.
you had a Vespa? I want a
Yeah, I
Vespa.
loved it.
My
It was
whole life I've
amazing.
wanted a Vespa.
Oh, it was so good. Used, and sold it for more than we bought it for. But like, so there's always hacks to it.
Oh wow, nice.
But yeah, like, come up with creative ways to like save money, right? But, depending, regardless of your situation, there's going to be work. It's not like, okay, like I want to be fired in 10 years. I'm just going to do this. Like, okay, like you can, but it takes time, it takes dedication, it takes motivation. I
Mhm.
think for most people, they get really hooked on the idea in the first year and like, okay, I went from negative net worth to zero, like all my debts paid off.
Yeah.
And now I have $10,000 saved. Great. And now I have $100,000 saved, which is the hardest. Like that is all you. That is, you are the workhorse. You are the work engine getting to that first 100,000. It's not the compound growth type of magic that appears. That is you,
Right.
and it's the hardest. But that's also when this doldrum of fire starts to kick in, and you're like, okay, now I have to get to 1 million or whatever your number is, and like that's still a ways away. And you've read through the blogs, you've listened to the podcasts, you've reached out to different people, you've read some books, and you've got the core material, but now you're just in the doldrum phase. And that's when you need to figure out how to make life enjoyable. That's when you need to work on that mindset and your why and your purpose and start building that life along the way. So that way, for us, it was travel to start. And now that we have our kids, they are our motivation and our reason and our purpose for doing all of this, right? So it's finding your why and your motivation. And of course, in the LGBTQ plus community, the process of having a kid can be very costly. And so that is an added cost that we in this community have to face. Like we were very lucky that Nick carried both times and worked with IUI the first time with Finn and the third time with Parker. So it was relatively a minor cost for us, a couple
Nice.
$1,000s each time, but it could be tens potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is a major, major cost. And my only advice to that, like I can't help on the cost side because you have no clue what it's going to end up actually being, but make a plan beforehand of, we are going to attempt, just for our example, IUI 3 times, take a break for 2 months, attempt IUI 3 more times. If that doesn't work, take a break for 2-3 months, try IVF 3 times. And if that doesn't work, it is not meant to be. But like, and as hard as it is to accept that, but like there's the financial costs, but there's also the emotional and psychological stress to all of this too. And I think having that plan beforehand will be like, write it down so you can always refer to it. Because your emotions are going to play into this. Like, well, maybe next time it's going to work, but maybe next time, but then that could lead to $200,000. And if you have that money to spend and it's worth it to you, great, then that's part of your plan. Make that part of your plan. But if you know you've only dedicated 50,000 only, it's still a crazy high number, only $50,000, then that's how your plan needs to plan out. Like maybe you get some unexpected windfall and that could be part of your plan. Like if we get, some crazy amount of money, then we can put it towards it. But if it's not written in your plan like that, then 50,000 is your number, and however long that takes, or maybe have a timeline, like we will try for a year or 2 years. And if that doesn't work, then it's not meant to be. Like, and it sucks to have to think like that. But I think unfortunately in our community, it's just a necessary evil, because you could end up spending years, and not just in our community, there's lots of fertility issues, outside of our community too. Right. That I think you have to be thinking about things and be proactive about this sort of plan ahead of time, or else you could end up going into debt. And, it pains me to have to think like to have to think that people are going into debt to have a kid when people are having oopsies all the time. Like it's just like we're like, we are totally, in the wrong for having to do all these costly things to have a child, when so many people in this community so badly want to be a family, and it just comes at this crazy cost. So that's really like my only advice there, is like to have a pre-plan for it all, because it could get very out of control.
Yeah. Same with investing. You need to have an entrance strategy and an exit strategy. And
yes.
The exit doesn't always work out the way you want.
Yes.
But I think this has been profound and wonderful. And you've given us everything that we were looking for. For those of our listeners and viewers who want to connect better with you and keep up with everything that's going on in your family of four's life, how can they track you online or in the virtual space?
Yeah, sure. So we have a blog. It's modernfimily.com. I'm becoming very unmotivated with it, to be completely honest. I'm finding way more of my time is going towards my kids. So I'm there, but not crazy. And then same thing with Instagram. We're at Modern FImily on Instagram. But again, like very little interaction going on there. But the best way to reach out, if you just want to say hi, like connect, something resonated, or you have a question, just email me at modernfimily@gmail.com. I love that we're doing this to help people and to build our community and reach out. And I do coaching. That's the one thing that I enjoy, actually, and am enjoying still with all of this. So I do one-on-one coaching as well. So that you can find the information on our blog about that, or I can send you the link to anyone who's interested for that. But yeah, those are the ways to reach out.
Awesome. We'll definitely link up to that and to your social and to your website. And folks, for those of you who are listening, just to let you know, it's Modern FImily, FImily, right?
Yes. So it's a play on Modern Family, the show, right? And looking back on it, I thought, oh, this is so smart. I think like branding, but now every Google thing goes to the show Modern Family.
You just spelled it wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Even if you type in Modern FImily, like sometimes it brings up Modern Family stuff. So yeah, it's a spin on that we've reached financial independence for our modern family.
Well, so maybe our listeners can help change the Google algorithms by typing in Modern FImily and clicking on Modern FImily.
Yes.
Yes.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for your time. And thank you to the rest of the family for staying outside during this interview.
This is what we
they don't
do.
have to go to the bathroom or eat anything.
Snacks, always snacks.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Court and Nick. and Finn and Parker for sharing your time with us again today. It was amazing. To you, our listeners, thank you for listening to another episode.
Here's your quick money takeaway from this show. There's always going to be an excuse why you cannot do something. But before you believe it, do the homework to make sure someone else in similar shoes hasn't already achieved it. When you find them, learn from them.
Thank you and have a great week.